Hi everybody, welcome to our third session of Australia X. Thank you so much for joining us all today. Excellent, it's good to see you all again. My name is Alex, for anyone that missed us at the introductory session. We are very fortunate today to welcome Jared, the Director of Teaching and Learning at E2 Language. So Jared Merlot, or Jay as his students call him, is the co-founder and director of Teaching and Learning at E2 Language, the world's most popular and trusted English test prep provider. We'll pop a link for that in the chat box, so make sure you look out for that. Jay taught English in various countries around the world before coming back to Melbourne to start the company. His IELTS, PTE and OET videos and methods are globally popular, having been viewed 55 million times on YouTube. The E2 platform has also prepared over 1 million candidates for their English exams with countless success stories. Today, Jay will be talking to you about decisions you need to make, about how to best prepare for and pass your English test. We also want to mention that thank you to all of our attendees today. There will actually be a giveaway for everyone who's joined us today. You are in with the chance to win a gold package or one of 3 express packages kindly donated by E2 Language. We will select 4 winners at random and be in contact with you. So stay on until the end of the webinar and we'll be announcing the 4 winners then. If you have any questions at all today during this workshop, please use the Q&A function down the bottom of your screens and we'll endeavour to answer these for you again at the end of the session. Thank you, Jared. I will now pass it over to you. We are just waiting for the screen share to come.
My mouse cursor disappeared at the last minute there.
All good, excellent.
Just had to give you a little bit of tension there. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Cool. My mouse cursor is working. Cool. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for coming along. Thanks very much, Alex, and thank you, Insider Guides and Pearson, for putting this session on. This is great. My name is Jay. I'm one of the expert teachers at E2 Language, and today I'm going to talk to you about English exams, how to choose, prepare for, and ultimately how to pass them. We realize that choosing an English exam is an important decision for you, and obviously needing to pass it for university entrance is huge. And these tests are challenging, to say the least, and you really do need to prepare for them as well. So we'll go through some of this today. Just as a brief introduction to me and my company, so I'm the co-founder and director of Teaching and Learning at E2 Language, which Alex mentioned is a very popular website for test preparation. I am an English language teacher at heart. I have a Master's of Applied Linguistics from the University of Melbourne. And as Alex also mentioned, we have a very popular YouTube channels. In fact, #1 YouTube channels for PTE and OET, probably #2 in the world for IELTS, and getting there for TOEFL as well. So if you do want to find us on YouTube, you can use those little E2 PTE, E2 IELTS, etc. to find us. What we're going to cover in today's session is we're going to look broadly at test taking. We're going to look more specifically at PT Academic, IELTS Academic, and TOEFL IBT. And we're going to zero in on the speaking and writing sections, which tend to be the most challenging sections. I'm just going to turn my little timer on here. I'm going to talk to you about content and format of each of these tests because they differ. I'm going to talk to you about the computer-based testing versus paper-based testing, the pros and cons of that. I'm going to talk to you about the different tasks and the lengths. Difficulty, we'll touch on that because there is variation between these tests as to which tasks are more or less difficult. We'll also touch on scoring and we'll also touch on preparation as well. So let's firstly talk about test content, okay? So of course, when you take an English test, they will test you on 4 things. These are called the macro skills: speaking, writing, reading, and listening. Okay, so you're going to get a score for each of these as well as an overall score. But the overall score is not actually that important for your migration or your visa or for your university entrance. They look at the 4 scores here on each of these skills. So let's zero in on speaking because this is a pretty challenging section of the test, especially if you come from a place where you've done lots of English studies, but it's probably been more reading and listening. You haven't actually had a chance to exercise your speaking skills. So let's just do a little bit of 101 linguistics first. I'm going to talk about what is speaking because it's something we do all the time, but we don't actually think about what it's comprised of, what its ingredients are. And it's actually pretty complex. So first of all, you have a social context in which you speak, and that dictates everything. It changes a lot of things. So if you're speaking to your friends versus speaking in an academic English exam, things will change, okay? What are the ingredients of speaking? Well, there are three key ingredients. You have pronunciation, you have vocabulary, and you have grammar. These really are the three ingredients of language per se that you need to build up before your tests. So what is pronunciation? Well, pronunciation consists of the sounds that you make, okay? And while there might be a lot of overlap between the sounds of English and your first language, often there are differences. There might be specific sounds that are said in English that you just don't have in your first language. These might be consonant sounds. These might be vowel sounds. These might be what's called consonant cluster sounds like pr or fl, for example. All these funny little noises that we make. This is a part of pronunciation. But there are also other features of pronunciation. It's not just the sounds like k, d, f, m, whatever it is. There's also things like word stress, okay? Where do you put the emphasis on the syllable in the word? Or sentence stress, or connected speech. There are a range of other elements in your pronunciation score. And actually, when we look at scoring in a minute, you'll see that you are scored separately on your pronunciation. And this is one part that will make up your speaking score. Then you have vocabulary. So these are the bricks of language, right? And grammar, which we'll talk about next, is like the glue that sticks the bricks together. So vocabulary, you're really scored on two things here. You're scored on how precise you can be in your speech. That is, you're using the right word at the right time to create the right meaning. But you're also scored on the range of vocabulary that you have, because if you've got a limited range of vocabulary, that's going to be problematic. You want to have a really broad range of vocabulary so you don't repeat yourself again and again, so you have access to synonyms, or you can paraphrase something, etc. And then with grammar, you also scored on those two elements as well. That is how accurate your grammar is. That is, are you using plural nouns correctly? Is your verb tense correct when you speak? And also range as well. You will be scored on range. That is, you can be flexible in the way that you speak. You can use a range of different sentence types to convey meaning clearly, okay? So when we stand back and look at speaking, we can see it's quite a complex phenomenon that we do. So how do they test this in these tests? Well, let's firstly look at PT Academic, then we'll look at IELTS, then we'll look at TOEFL. So what happens in PT Academic speaking? Well, there are 5 tasks in PT Academic. The first one's called read aloud. Then there's repeat sentence, there's describe image, retell lecture, and answer short question. And you'll get a number of different tasks for each of these, you'll get a number of different questions for each of these tasks. So let's take a look at read aloud. This is the first task of PT Academic that you'll do on test day. It's pretty straightforward. What you have to do is you have to read that paragraph of text aloud. You'll get a chance to rehearse the paragraph. That is, you'll be able to whisper it to yourself before the audio starts recording you. Then you'll be able to, then the microphone will open and you'll have to read it as naturally and as clearly as you possibly can. That's it. That's the first task of PT Academic. Mind you, you will get, I think you get about 5 or 6 of these in a row. And sometimes you'll come across complex words or complex phrases, for example. The next task in PT Academic is called repeat sentence. This is what it looks like on test day. What happens is you're going to hear a single sentence, just one sentence. You're going to listen very carefully to that sentence. And the microphone will open almost immediately after, and you repeat back the sentence exactly as it was said. That is, you use the same sequence of words, use the same grammar, and you also use the same intonation, the same fluency that was said as well. You don't have to copy an accent by any means. Your accent is fine, but you do have to mimic the way that the speaker says it. And I think you get about 10 or 12 of these. This is quite an interesting little test. You might be thinking this is just a memory test. It is to a degree. It does use your working memory, of course, but ultimately, this is a test of your vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation again, which I just talked about, which is so important. The third task is called describe image. This is what it looks like on test day. You're going to see some sort of image. It might be a graph, a bar chart, pie chart, something like that. Usually some sort of graph, although sometimes you get an image or a map. You'll have 25 seconds to analyze this image. That is, you'll look at it. You're going to understand what's happening in that picture. After 25 seconds, the microphone will open. You'll have up to 40 seconds to then describe the image in some detail. Obviously not too much detail, but in some detail, okay? That's a challenger. This one requires practice. The fourth task is called retell lecture. What's going to happen here is you're going to see a picture, and the picture is going to indicate what the lecture you're about to hear will be about. For example, you look at this one, you think probably driverless cars or car safety or something like that. You're going to hear part of a lecture that'll go for between 60 and 90 seconds, okay? While you're listening to that lecture, however, you're going to be taking notes. You will get a pen and paper on test day. You'll be taking notes. Then after the lecture finishes, you have just 10 seconds to prepare, or take a deep breath really, because there's not much you can do in 10 seconds. Then the audio opens and you need to retell what you just heard, or retell the lecture in up to 40 seconds, okay? This one also requires practice. This one requires, it has multiple skills. It's testing you actually on your listening and your speaking skills as well. So you do need to be able to take notes. Finally, the final task of the speaking section in PT Academic is answer short question. This one's very straightforward. You're going to hear a question. For example, it might say something like, probably should have thought of one before. What do you call two lines that run side by side but never meet? What's the answer to that one? The answer to that one would be parallel. And that's the answer to that question. And all you do is you just say parallel. Of course, you need to get this pronunciation right in order for the computer to recognize that as being correct. But that's a brief little snapshot of the PT Academic test. You are scored in speaking from 10 to 90, okay? And this test is entirely scored via a computer algorithm, okay? There is no human being listening to your voice. And we're going to talk in a minute about the differences between tests that are marked by computer algorithms versus human raters. There are pros and cons, but just be mindful that that is the case with PT Academic. Let's briefly discuss IELTS speaking now. So IELTS speaking, there are 3 tasks. First one is small talk. This one's pretty straightforward. You're going to have some questions like, it's honest, I've taken this IELTS test, I've taken PT Academic once, I've taken IELTS 5 times, and I've taken TOEFL once. So I've had quite a bit of experience in the speaking section of IELTS. And some of the questions they ask you are quite funny, if not strange. Like, you'll be talking to the examiner and the examiner will say, do you like the rain? And you sort of think, yes. But there's a certain way that you need to respond here where you exercise your vocabulary breadth, your vocabulary depth, your grammatical range, your grammatical accuracy, your pronunciation, etc. You should certainly not go into these exams unprepared. Even if you're a native English speaker or your English is excellent, there are strategies that you should learn that will maximize your scores. In fact, we have ex-IELTS examiners working here at E2 Language, and it's not uncommon for a native speaker to get a low score in IELTS speaking. And you think, how is that possible? The reason is that they don't perform well on test day. They don't understand the strategies, and they might just answer very briefly and say, yeah, I like the rain. But by saying I like the rain, there's no evidence for the examiner there of vocabulary range, of grammatical grammatical range, etc. So anyway, you need to be a bit strategic here. The second part of IELTS speaking is challenging, I think. This one really does require practice and a strategy. This is a 2-minute monologue. That is, what will happen is the examiner will give you a topic. The topic might be describe a gift that you received, or talk about a recent gift, or something like that, okay? It's a pretty broad sort of topic. You get some dot points which talk about who gave you the gift, whatever, stuff like that. You have 1 minute to prepare. That is, you get a piece of paper and 1 minute to write down ideas. And then you must speak, well, you don't have to, but you should speak up to 2 minutes on that topic without going round and round in circles, making sure that, again, you're exercising vocabulary range, vocabulary depth, grammatical range, clear pronunciation, internal coherence of what you're saying, etc. This is tough to do if you haven't practiced. With practice, it helps. And with a good strategy, it helps even more. In IELTS speaking part 3, you will then move on to a discussion with the examiner. And the discussion almost borders on sort of philosophical type questions, or certainly questions that require critical thinking skills. For example, they usually follow on from the second part. So it might be about gifts, and the examiner will ask you about gift giving in your culture. The examiner will ask you about, I can't think of this off the top of my head, but quite complex questions about gifts here. And the reason they're doing that is they're trying to elicit from you as much of that flexibility of language as you possibly have. And here is where you really show off your language skills, okay? So if you are trying to get up towards an IELTS 8, all 3 parts are important, obviously, but really here you really fully exercise your linguistic skills with the examiner. In IELTS, you are scored in speaking, in all of them actually, from 0 to 9. You're scored here also in increments of 0.5. That is, it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It goes 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, etc. If you think about the scoring there between PT Academic and IELTS, because the scoring in PT Academic is much more granular. It's much more refined. It's more precise. The increments in IELTS of 0.5 lack a certain precision. So one of the problems we see with candidates who take IELTS, they just might get a 6.5 and then a 6.5, and they can't really see if they're improving or in fact possibly getting worse. One good thing about the PT scoring is because it is very fine-grained, you can see precisely where you are and how you're doing. Can be a bit of a frustration for IELTS test takers. Okay, let's talk briefly about TOEFL speaking. So there are sort of 2 broad tasks here. There's one called independent speaking. That is, you'll get a prompt. The prompt will ask you about something quite broad. You'll have to speak for 15 to 30 seconds about that prompt. Usually these are university-based questions. So it might ask you about, again, I probably should have thought of some of these before I came on. Anyway, you can go to e2language.com and find out for yourself. The second task, or the second type of task that you get in TOEFL IBT is called integrated. What this means is you'll do some listening and some reading and some note-taking during the listening section before you actually then speak, okay? So you'll be using cues from something you've read and something you've listened to in order to formulate your monologue or your speech. And you speak for between 15 to 30 seconds and 45 to 60 seconds in these tasks. TOEFL IBT is, let me just check my timer here if you don't mind. Cool. TOEFL is scored between 0 and 30, and TOEFL is scored with a combination of a computer-based algorithm and a human examiner as well. So let's just do a broad comparison here of the 2 tasks, the 3 tests on speaking. So if we follow the green one at the top first, PT Academic, we can see the format of the test. It's a computer-based test. There is no PT Academic paper-based version. It's 100% marked by a computer algorithm. It's not interactive. What does that mean? That means if you compare it to IELTS, in IELTS you're having a conversation, especially in part 1 and part 2. Sorry, part 1 and part 3, especially in part 3. It's very much a to and fro interaction with the examiner. In PT Academic, there's no to and fro happening. You're really just exercising your own speech. You're not, in retail lecture, you do need to listen, of course, and but yes, there's no to and fro there. As I mentioned, the scoring is between 10 and 90, And overall, the speaking section in PT Academic goes for about 15 minutes. But as I mentioned, it scores you on a number of, you have the 5 tasks with multiple questions within each task. So I think all up there must be about 30 or 40 actual questions there. If we look at the red one now, horizontally, we can see it's human marked, human format. That was a typo. It should say paper-based. No, it should say, sorry, I did get it correct. It's one-on-one with a person. There is actually no computer-based IELTS speaking. There is a new computer-based IELTS test where you can do your writing, reading, and listening. However, the speaking section of IELTS still remains a dialogue with a person. Okay, so there's that. There are pros and cons here with computer-based testing and actually doing it with the examiner. Some people don't like the computer for speaking. They actually prefer to sit with a person. And I must say, of all the IELTS tests I've taken, the IELTS examiners have been extraordinarily lovely people, which is good. Some people, however, do not like to speak to a person. They find it a little bit nerve-wracking, and they actually find it easier or less nerve-wracking to actually do the speaking on the computer. With the IELTS speaking, it is marked also by a person, by a human being with a brain, not a computer-based algorithm. And in fact, the person you speak to on test day will be the one who is doing the marking, okay? It's interactive in that, especially in part 1 and part 3, there is to and fro dialogue. You're scored, as I mentioned, from 0 to 9. 0 means that you just didn't turn up. 9 means that you did extraordinarily well and you exercised all of those aspects that we talked about before about vocabulary and grammar and structure, coherence, clear pronunciation, etc. Overall, the IELTS speaking test goes for between 11 and 14 minutes. Then you have TOEFL. It's a computer-based, or TOEFL IBT at least, is a computer-based test. It's marked both by the algorithm and the human. It's not interactive. It's you speaking into the computer. It's scored between 0 and 30, and the length of that is 17 minutes. Cool. Let me keep going here. Please hold your questions to the end. Let's have a brief little discussion here about algorithms versus people, because this is increasingly happening in language testing where we're moving away. Humum, do you like that? That's a good little typo. Humums. I don't know what a humum is. It's a human. Yes, we're moving more and more towards computer-based marking. So automatic algorithms that mark your speaking and your writing, which is a pretty interesting development. Let me just briefly talk to you about the PT Academic speaking algorithm and how they actually created this, how they trained the machine that does the assessment. So there were 10,000 people selected, both male and female, of course, from more than 120 different language groups. So this machine is trained with 120 different accents, different languages. Obviously, when you come from whatever language you come from, you're going to bring with it a certain accent, a certain variation in vocabulary, etc. So it has a very broad data set that was put into the computer. Of those 10,000 people, they collected 400,000 responses. These were collected and marked by expert human raters. So what they did is they got the people to do the tasks first, then they got human raters to mark them, because you need the humans to do it first in order to then train the algorithm. So you can think about it like this. The brain in the algorithm there is sort of the collective marking of 400,000 responses, okay? So I won't go into this too much, mainly because I don't understand it myself, but the correlation, basically what this means of 0.96 is it is as good as, if not better than, a human rater, certainly more reliable, and it doesn't get hungry, it doesn't get tired, and it doesn't, we'll talk about this in a second. Actually, let's have a look here. So how accurate is the algorithm? It's good. Is it perfect? No. Can it become perfect? Yes, with extra training, with additional training, with more technology, etc. Does it have biases, the algorithm? Well, you could argue that there are biases trained into the algorithm from the outset. So it's not perfect. It has some perhaps, which can be ironed out in future, but it's certainly very good. Is it reliable in that it'll give you the same score again and again? If you put the same speaking in, will it spit out the same score? Yes. What about if I take the test today, take it tomorrow, etc.? Is it going to give me the same score? No, because your language changes from day to day. You may notice that some days you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you find it difficult to formulate sentences. Some days you wake up on the right side of the bed and language just comes to you beautifully and naturally. So it's reliable, but sometimes you may not be. Humans, are they accurate? It depends. It depends on the examiner. The IELTS examiners, for example, are trained very well. However, they are not 100% consistent across the board. Are they biased? Well, it's all humans are biased. Let's just say that. There's enough scientific research to suggest that we all suffer from different biases. Are they reliable? Pretty reliable. People tend to get the same score each time they go, unless they put in the effort to actually improve. Just going to check my timing again. So how do you prepare for a speaking test? Well, you need to do two main things. One is you need to build your fundamental skills, okay, that we talked about before: vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation. These are the ingredients of language. And if you're lacking vocabulary, or you're lacking grammatical accuracy and grammatical range, or your pronunciation isn't entirely clear, that's where you need to start. That's where you need to build your skills. Because without that, you won't be able to succeed, okay? That's a fact. These are English language tests. They can't be gamed. You do need to ultimately have the skills, the fundamental skills to get there. So what happens if you're pretty good at English or you're very good at English? What's the second step? The second step then is test prep, right? What I mean by test prep is task familiarization. So for example, we looked at PTE describe image. You need to understand how to do that task like it's second nature before test day. How do you do that? Well, you need to learn methods or structures, for example. Then you need to apply, that's the application bit. You need to apply those methods, those structures to practice questions until it's just really immediate and seamless for you. But what's really important here in number 2 for test preparation is feedback, and feedback from experts, because you may be doing something incorrect that you are unaware of. And it's only when you sit in front of me, for example, one of the teachers at E2 Language, that we will be able to point out what you're doing wrong. It's very difficult when you're speaking another language to know what your errors are. What are your grammatical errors, your pronunciation errors? You're probably unaware. If you are aware, that's good, because it means at least you've identified it and you can work on it. Cool. So one of the things we do at E2 Language is we train people for their tests. We prepare them. We give one-on-one tutorials. We have mock tests with feedback, for example. So if you do need some help with your speaking test, do check out e2language.com. You can sign up for free. You can think about upgrading your account for live classes, tutorials, etc. Okay, we're now going to shift gears. We've talked about speaking. We're going to talk now about writing, because this really is the hardest part of the test. If you look at the statistics, the global statistics for IELTS test takers, for example, they actually provide the data on every country's performance around the world for listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And by and large, writing is the most difficult part of the test. And I think it probably applies to the other tests as well. Writing's difficult. Okay, so let's focus in on writing. So let's step back and do a little linguistics 101 here. What is writing? Well, again, you have a social context, because are you text messaging to your friend, or are you writing an academic essay, because your language will change? What are the ingredients of writing? Well, there's no pronunciation in writing, but you have vocab, you have grammar, and this time you really have structure. Okay, this is really important. Of course, it exists in speaking too, but structure is really, really important in writing. Vocabulary, you have range, again, you have precision, but this time you have an additional one, which is spelling, because you need to spell that vocabulary correctly. Grammar, you have accuracy, you have range, That is, you need to be flexible. You need to write different types of sentence structures. You can't just write short, simple sentences every time. Subject, verb, object, subject, verb, object. That won't get you a good score. You need to be able to create compound sentences, complex sentences, question forms, modal verbs, whatever it is. So you need real flexibility there. And for structure, well, there's sort of three main structures that you can think about. You have, if you're writing an essay, you'll have an overall essay structure. I'm sure a lot of you have probably forgotten how to do that. I certainly did the first time I took IELTS. Overall essay structure, which consists of paragraph structures. There is a structure for an introductory paragraph, a body paragraph, and a conclusion. And then within the paragraph, you have sentences, and sentences have structure as well. You need to get the word order correct. And within that, you'll see right down the bottom there, punctuation, which is another element of writing. So if we step back and look at what is writing generally, you can see that it's complex, and no wonder people struggle with it. Cool. So let's have a brief look at PTE academic writing. What are the tasks that are involved? Well, really there are two main writing tasks in PT Academic: summarize written text and write essay. But there's also a listening task called summarize spoken text, which contributes points to your writing score. And there's also one from reading, and there's another one from listening, and there's another one from listening as well. So just be mindful that if you are taking PT Academic and you're struggling on the writing section, it may not just be summarize written text and write essay. It may be other tasks from the listening section, for example, that might be affecting your score. Let's briefly look at these tasks. So summarize written text looks like this. You can see there's a big chunk of text there, up to 300 words. You have to read and understand that text, because what you're going to do is you're going to summarize that into one sentence. A single sentence summary, one sentence, not two, not three, not a paragraph, a single sentence summary of that text. You get 10 minutes to do this. So you have enough time to read it very carefully and write your sentence and rewrite your sentence until you're happy that it's captured the main idea and any supporting important details. Then you click next. Then you'll move on to the essay. Okay, the essay is pretty standard. It's an argumentative or persuasive type of essay. Okay, that is the only type you get in PT Academic. There's no problem solution. There's no advantages, disadvantages. There's no whatever. It's an argumentative / persuasive essay where you take a side and you argue for that side. You might mention the other side, but really that's the type of essay that you get. It's between 200 and 300 words, and you get 20 minutes, so you do have to do things quite quickly. Summarized spoken text also contributes quite a few points to your writing score. This is what it looks like. What's going to happen is you'll hear a lecture. Just like retail lecture in speaking, you'll need to take notes. Then you're going to turn your notes and use your memory, and you're going to write a little summary of between 50 to 70 words, okay? Just a single paragraph summary of what that lecture or interview was about. I won't touch on the other ones. Again, it's scored between 10 and 90 points. It is marked entirely by a computer algorithm. Let's talk about IELTS academic writing now. So two tasks here. The first one is called Writing Task 1, and it's a description of an image. That image might be a table, like a data table, a table of data, a chart, like pie charts, for example, or bar charts. Might be a diagram, a process, like how they make paper from trees, or graphs, line graph. Could be multiple line graphs, up to 3 line graphs I've seen. I've actually taken an IELTS where I had to describe 3 different line graphs. Or you might get a map showing sort of before and after. This is a very technical piece of writing. It needs to be 150 words or more. This really requires practice and feedback. I recommend that more than anything. There's a certain way that you need to write this. Yes, that's all I'll say there. Task 2 is an essay of 250 words or more. This time the essay prompts differ: advantages, disadvantages, opinion, problem, solution, cause and effect. There are a few more different types that you'll need to get. And you very much need to write that type of essay. You can't just, if you get a problem solution essay, for example, and you write about advantages, disadvantages, which a lot of people tend to do, that's not going to work in your favor. If you're interested in academic writing, you can check out the E2 Language podcast. It's called E2 Talks, or actually go to our YouTube channel. There's heaps of stuff that we do on writing there, which you can check out first. Then when you're ready, come across to e2language.com and we can help you out from there. So as I mentioned before, with IELTS speaking, you're scored from 0 to 9. Same thing here in increments of 0.5. I'm sort of going to rush through a little bit here. Let's talk about TOEFL writing. Like the speaking, you also have integrated and independent. This time with writing, the first one is integrated. That is, you're going to read something, you're going to listen to something, then you're going to write about it. Okay, so you're not just using your imagination, you are using prompts given to you. Okay, that's called integrated writing. Next is pretty much an essay. It's called independent writing. It's an essay on personal experience or opinion. Just like the speaking, this is scored from 0 to 30, and it's scored via both a computer algorithm and a human rater. So let's do a little comparison here. So PT Academic, it is a computer-based test. The writing is marked via the algorithm. There are 3 main writing tasks, the word counts of which, the first one where you write a sentence is between 5 and 75 words. The essay is between 200 and 300 words. You can write 201, that's fine, as long as you make it over 200. And the summary one is between 50 and 70 words. You get 10 minutes to write your single sentence, you get 20 minutes to write your essay, you get 10 minutes to write your summary, scored between 10 and 90. IELTS Academic, we're talking about here. Now, you can now, well, for quite a while, I think it's been about a year, take the IELTS on the computer, which I highly recommend. I've taken the paper-based test 3 times. I've taken the computer-based test twice. It's not more or less difficult, like the test content stays the same, but the medium, the computer-based medium, makes it much easier to get a higher score. Because when you're writing with pen and paper, you can't erase things very easily. You can't insert things. You can't move sentences. In fact, you can't just delete and write another paragraph. You're writing with a gray lead pencil on a piece of paper. That's tough, really, really tough. So this is a great development from IELTS, bringing in these computer-based tests, because it has made getting an IELTS 7, 7.5, 8 achievable, which is good. It is marked 100% by people, humans. Humans mark your essays there, or all of your writing. Word counts 150 plus for task 1, 250 plus for task 2. Time limit, you get 60 minutes total time. 20 minutes you should spend on task 1, 40 minutes on task 2. You're scored between 0 and 9. TOEFL, computer-based test marked by an algorithm and a human being. You write between 150 and 225 is recommended, and around 300 words for your essay. 20 minutes for the first task, 30 minutes for the second task. They are timed separately. Cool. Whoops, that should say writing. How to prepare for writing. Imagine it says writing. Right, fundamental skills again. Whoa, feedback poll just popped up. Fundamental skills again for this is these are English tests. You can't just use strategies and tips and tricks. That will not get you the scores you need. You need to build fundamental skills in English. It is ultimately testing you on that, okay? So what are the fundamental skills of writing? As we discussed, vocabulary, grammar, and structure, okay? They're the 3 keys to your writing score here. Once you have that down, once you have a broad vocabulary and precise word choice, You have a broad grammatical range. That is, you're flexible with your sentence structures, and accurate. Your plural nouns are right, your verb tenses are right, your prepositions are right, etc. And you've learned structure. That is, you know how to structure paragraphs, structure entire essays, etc. Then you can or should start on test prep, which again is task familiarization, understanding the parameters of the task. What do you need to do? The methods, how you do it, and the structures, how you write that essay, structure your essay. Application, you then need to start applying the methods and structures to practice questions. And again, feedback is critical here. One of the things we do, for example, on e2language.com is you'll type up your essays, submit them through to us, all done through the computer. Our expert teachers on the other end will actually go through and mark your writing according to the criteria and send it back. And just before I move on, I'll just briefly discuss what is the criteria, because this is ultimately what it's all about. So the examiners who are marking your essay, or the algorithm that is automatically marking your essay, are built around a thing called criteria. You can think about criteria as like a checklist, okay? Have you done this? Yes, no, or have you done it to what degree, good or bad, okay? So they mark you on grammatical range, grammatical accuracy, structure of your paragraphs, overall structure of your essay, vocabulary precision, vocabulary range, etc. These are the checklists that the human examiner is looking at, marking your essay, or the algorithm is automatically using when it's whatever it's doing to your writing, okay? That's critical. That's what we do actually on e2language.com. We use the same checklist, the same criteria to mark your essays and send it back to you with feedback against that criteria. So you know precisely what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, okay? Cool. Just again, I think this is the end of my presentation, but do check out e2language.com if you do need to prepare for your test. I think... Oh, and if you're watching this on YouTube at a later date, do click subscribe. And that, I believe, ends my talk. And I hope I wasn't on mute the whole time.
No, you were perfect. Thank you so much, Jared. That was excellent. We had heaps of questions coming in through the Q&A as you were talking.
Cool.
A lot of chat going on in the chat box as well. We were sharing resources. No, that was excellent. Thank you so much. So before we proceed, we've collected a couple of questions from the live Q&A that I'd like to get to. But we do want to announce the winners of the 4 packages. So what we're going to do is we're going to announce those names in the chat now. Just look out. And then if those 4 people could please message us privately in the Zoom chat with your email addresses, we will get in touch shortly with more details. So thank you to everyone for getting involved with that one. There will be heaps of giveaways throughout all of Australia X. So make sure that you're attending the sessions and getting involved, getting engaged, and there'll be lots of other giveaways as we go. So now to get onto some of the questions we've gotten, Jared, we had one from Gonzalo who said, in regards to PTE Academic and its algorithm, would I get higher marks if I try to speak with a native accent or a pronunciation? Does it matter if I pronounce these words with either a British or American English accent?
Great question. No, you shouldn't try to fake an accent. As I mentioned, the algorithm was, you collected, was it 10,000 speakers in 120 different languages? So you can safely assume that your language was included in that sample that actually trained the algorithm. Mm-hmm. What you need to be careful of, though, is your accent affecting your pronunciation? Everyone has an accent. I have an accent. You have an accent. Everyone has an accent, right? But, however, there's a standard form of English pronunciation that is considered standard, and also how these algorithms are trained. I'll give you an example. From people from South India often have problems pronouncing the difference between v and w. Mm-hmm. So instead of playing the violin, they'll often say, I play the violin. And that's sort of standard in South India. That's an accent problem. That's an accent issue. And it is a pronunciation problem because it's actually, it's unclear. So some people need to identify which particular sounds are affecting their pronunciation based on their accent and work on that. And that's hard to do. we do have a website called e2school.com, and it has a pronunciation course. And what you can do in that is you can select your first language, and it's actually going to tell you which sounds you need to work on.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's cool.
Brilliant. Yeah, if you'd like to share that resource, I think that would be very useful.
Yep.
So we have another question here from Neha, who said, going back to your discussion of the describe an image section,
Yeah.
are we expected to objectively describe the picture? And then she said, its colors, pictures, trends, etc. Or are we expected to be academically inclined? For example, if an image shows a life cycle, should we talk about what animals are in the image or talk about them more scientifically?
Yeah, this is a great question. You need to be very careful what you believe on YouTube with what people say. There's a lot of YouTube channels and teachers on YouTube that sort of try to game these English language tests, and that you should certainly not talk about the image and just talk about its colors, etc. That's not how it's trained. With every single one of those images, what they do is they put it through a massive testing cycle, and they collect heaps of data on it. That is thousands of people describing the image in different ways, with different accents, etc. None of them are talking about the colors and stuff. They're talking about the graph and the trends of the graph, the highest, the lowest, the x-axis, the y-axis, etc. That's what you talk about. If you talk about colors and isn't it a nice day today, you could risk getting a 0.
Excellent. Thanks, Jared. So we have another question here. It was anonymous, but we shall ask it anyways. So it's in regards to the algorithm, which you have touched on, but if anyone needed a refresher here, are students advantaged by having their tests marked by the algorithm versus if they were marked by a human?
Right now, it's about equal. That little statistic I showed you pretty much says that they're on par. I think what's exciting, so that you can be reassured of that.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is exciting though about computer-based language learning technology is that in the not too distant future, they're going to be better than people, much more accurate, much more consistent. So as Pearson, for example, or TOEFL start to improve their algorithms, they'll eventually be far more accurate than people.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Right now, about the same.
Yep. Okay. Easy. And another one here from Shreya, who said, again, it's kind of a summary here as we come to the end of this session. What are some of the things that one needs to consider when taking the PTE academic? Is there kind of 3 top tips that you can rattle off?
Yeah. First one is have a big breakfast.
Yeah.
These tests are exhausting. Once you get to that sort of 3-hour mark and you're trying to do listening exercise, oh my God, you really you need blood sugar. You need something still in your system.
Yeah.
And of course, a good night's sleep. Also, though, there's a lot. You don't want to cram. You don't want to start memorizing essay structures the night before the test, etc., and put yourself under enormous pressure. These exams can really provoke a lot of anxiety in people, which is completely natural. But one thing that will help you with that is if you start preparing well in advance. And so you're not really just cramming and memorizing stuff. By the time you get to exam day, you've really understood how to structure an essay, what happens in retail lecture, and you're not frantically thinking, oh my God, I've forgotten how to do this. You want it to be pretty second nature. So do start preparing well in advance.
Yep, excellent. And that, funnily enough, brings me on to my next question that we've gotten from the audience. This is from Roshni. Is it possible to prepare in just 1 month for your English test? What would you recommend? Yeah,
it depends on your fundamental English skills. If your fundamental skills are native-like, that is, you have all the grammar you need, a large vocabulary, your pronunciation's clear, I think you can probably learn this sort of test prep stuff in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. If, however, you need to build up your reading skills or your vocabulary, your listening skills, then you might need much longer. It entirely depends on your fundamental skills.
Excellent. So another one here from Nick, an interesting one, very prevalent to now. he's worried about his speaking side of the test with coronavirus. If he wears a mask, does it affect his score because the computer can't understand him?
It's a great question. I actually don't know the answer to that one, but I would recommend taking that up with Pearson or TOEFL, whichever test you're taking, and asking them what they're doing about that. I'm not sure, but yeah, great question.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got another one here from Pradeep, and he's essentially asking for a study plan. Is there somewhere that students can go to get some sort of study plan idea, a template that they can work to?
Yeah, one of the things we have on E2 language, which is really cool, is you come in and you tell us, you answer 3 questions. You tell us if you've taken the test before. If you have, you tell us your previous scores. So the computer knows your previous scores. And then you tell us which scores you need. And it does a little calculation. And what it does, it pulls all of the course material and puts it into this, we call it a study pathway. And so it basically tells you what you need to study, what's most important to you. So that's really helpful. The other thing is we run live classes. So if you're taking PT, we run 2 live classes a day, 7 days a week. So you come to the class, it's nice. There'll be 50 other people in there, the teacher's there. So that really helps you with your, just to maintain motivation, because it can be really boring preparing for these tests by yourself, to be honest.
Excellent. Thanks, Jared. I think we'll take one last question. Unless anyone else has any questions in our audience, please send them through to the Q&A. We have a little bit of time left here. We've got one here from Mitra, and she was saying that she did her PTE academic the other day, and she did well in grammar and spelling. She did well in other aspects of the test, but she didn't do so well when it came to grammar and spelling. How should a student tackle it if they're doing really well in one section of the test but struggling on others? Is it a case of, if they're refreshing, do they need to be refreshing the sections that they're quite confident in and kind of do it as a cohesive, as a test? Or is it something where they should just really hone in and focus on the things that they know that they're struggling with?
Yeah, it sort of depends. Like if you've just missed out on the scores in, let's say you've nailed reading, listening, and speaking, right? You got a perfect score in each of those, but for writing you got 75, so you've missed out. Then it really is a matter of focusing on essay structure. Maybe it was a grammatical issues, etc. So just focusing in on those writing tasks. If you're sort of borderline, like your scores are hovering around, maybe you just passed reading, your listening was down, etc., then it really is a matter of going back to the drawing board, spending a month building up those test-taking skills, maybe doing a bit of grammar work. Again, e2school.com for those fundamental skills, and then giving it another shot in, say, a month's time. It really depends how close you are and how many skills you're off by.
Excellent. Thank you, Jared. So a couple of people have been messaging asking how they can reach you. So we've popped the link to E2 Learning in the chat. So make sure that you're scrolling back and you can get in touch with someone there if you are preparing for your test and you need that additional support. We've just had a question come through from Mahedi, and he said, how can he improve his reading speed? He runs out of time when it comes to the reading section.
Yeah, it's a good question, because you do need to manage in every reading test, doesn't matter if it's TOEFL, PTE, or IELTS, you need to manage your time. You have sufficient time. You don't need to be a whiz-bang speed reader. They give you enough time to, can read at a moderate pace. But improving your reading speed is a matter of improving how quickly you get the meaning of the words. So if you're looking at a sentence, for example, and it's taking you a few seconds to sort of get the gist, the meaning, then really what you're dealing with is a problem of vocabulary and grammar. You're dealing with the problem of maybe you're unfamiliar with that word and therefore the sentence isn't very clear, or maybe it's actually a grammatical thing. Maybe you're looking at a sentence and it has a different grammatical structure and you're sort of thinking, oh, I don't quite get this. That's chewing up seconds of time. And when you're dealing with long passages of text, that all adds up. So I suspect it's a sort of probably a vocabulary issue more than anything.
Excellent. Thank you, Jared. So we'll finish it up for today. I want to thank everyone that has attended. There's been so much engagement in the Q&A and also in the chat box. We've actually just gotten a message from Charlene, and she said that she took her PTE test in July and wearing a mask didn't affect her score at all.
Cool.
So for students that were asking about that in regards to wearing a mask when they're doing their English tests, there you go. There's some first-hand knowledge from someone that has taken the test and didn't find that it was an issue. But as Jared said, you can get in touch with your test provider and see if there are any arrangements available if that is something that you need to do, if you need to wear a mask when you're doing a test. So again, thank you so much, Jared. Congratulations to all of our prize winners as well. I think everyone has gotten back to us now, so we'll be in touch soon with all the details on that. Again, Jared, thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for your
Thanks
time.
very much. Good one.
Excellent, thank you. And we will see you all at the next Australia X session. We'll see you then. Bye, everyone.